At my son's holiday dinner, my daughter-in-law raised her glass and called me a loser for losing my job. She smirked while his colleagues stared at their plates. I just smiled. The next morning, she learned the house she bragged about online was mine all along, and she had 30 days to leave. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. Evelyn Hartman's fork tapped against her wine glass at exactly 9:30, the soft chime slicing through the hum of conversation. She lifted her chin with quiet poise, a woman who had spent decades learning when silence spoke louder than words. Across the polished oak table, Vanessa Caldwell rose with the practiced grace of someone who thrived on an audience. Her smile was dazzling, her manicure gleaming in the candlelight, but her voice carried the saccharine edge of malice. Everyone, she announced, raising her glass. Let's toast to my dear mother-in-law, Evelyn, who just shared the delightful news that she's unemployed again. Apparently, she left her job because of health reasons. Her fingers formed exaggerated air quotes, the gesture as sharp as a knife. Tell us, Evelyn, how does it feel to be such a complete loser at your age? The words fell like shards of glass. Around the table, Daniel's colleagues froze. Their wives stared at their plates as if the porcelain patterns might rescue them from the humiliation unraveling before their eyes. My son's hands stiffened beside his plate, his fork clattering to the china, but he said nothing. Not one of them dared to breathe, let alone speak. Evelyn inhaled, slow and measured. Her heart did not race, her hand did not tremble. She set her wine glass down with surgical precision and turned her gaze on the young woman who had mistaken cruelty for wit. Well, Vanessa, she said, her tone calm as morning coffee, I imagine it feels about the same as learning you'll be evicted from the house you've been living in rent-free for 3 years. The silence sharpened. Vanessa's smug expression drained to a deathly white. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this house, Evelyn replied, her smile a mirror of Vanessa's former arrogance. The one you've redecorated and flaunted across your little social media post as if it were your palace. It belongs to me, Vanessa, not Daniel, me. And as of tomorrow, you and my son have 30 days to find a new place to live. Daniel's fork slipped from his hand, striking the plate with a clatter. Mom, what? Evelyn turned to him, her expression softening only a fraction. Sweetheart, didn't your wife tell you? When the bank refused your mortgage because of your student loans, I bought this house outright. Cash. $420,000 from your father's life insurance. Your names have never been on the deed, not once. The weight of the revelation pressed down on the room. Vanessa's mouth opened and closed, a fish gasping for air. Color rose blotchy across her cheeks, her facade crumbling. Around the table, smirks flickered on faces too long suppressed by her venom. No one liked Vanessa much. Her sharp tongue had left its mark on more than a few. You can't just throw us out, she stammered, her voice cracking. Actually, I can. It's called being a landlord. Look it up. Evelyn pushed her chair back, the navy fabric of her dress whispering against the wood as she stood. She gathered her purse, slipped her shawl over her shoulders, and straightened with a dignity that burned brighter than any insult. She let her gaze sweep the table one final time. Thank you all for a lovely evening. Daniel, we'll talk tomorrow when you've had time to process this. Vanessa. Her lips curved into a smile sweet as poison. I suggest you start browsing apartment listings. The rental market is brutal this time of year. No one moved, no one spoke. The candle flames wavered as if the very air recoiled from the confrontation. Evelyn walked out of her own dining room, each step a reminder that respect was not requested. It was commanded. Behind her, she left silence, broken only by the faint tremor of a woman who had just learned that karma, much like good wine, is best served at precisely the right temperature. The morning after that disastrous dinner, Evelyn Hartman sat in her sunroom, coffee warming her hands, the newspaper folded neatly on her lap. Outside, dawn stretched pale light across the garden, dew shimmering on the roses her late husband had once planted. She waited. She knew the call would come. It arrived at precisely 7:15. Mom, what the hell happened last night? Daniel's voice carried exhaustion and disbelief. Evelyn could almost see him pacing the kitchen, or her kitchen, raking his fingers through his hair the way he had since he was a boy in trouble. Language, Daniel, she said evenly, and I think you know exactly what happened. Your wife decided to humiliate me in front of a room full of strangers. So I reminded her of her place in the world. You can't just kick us out of our home, he shot back. It isn't your home, sweetheart. It never was. Evelyn set down her cup with deliberate care. Do you remember 3 years ago when you and Vanessa were house hunting? You loved that little tutor on Maple Street, but the bank wouldn't approve your mortgage because of your student loan debt. Silence. Do you remember what I said? Evelyn continued, her voice measured. That I'd help, that we'd figure something out? What you didn't know, Daniel, is that I didn't co-sign a loan. I bought this house outright. $420,000, cash, your father's life insurance. The payments you've been making every month for 3 years? Rent, paid to me, not to a bank, not to a mortgage company. To me. On the other end of the line, Daniel breathed heavily, his silence louder than shouting. The deed has always been in my name. I kept it that way to protect the investment. A smart decision, as it turns out. She paused, letting the truth settle like stones. Why didn't you tell us? His voice cracked, more confused than angry. Evelyn softened, but only slightly. Daniel was not cruel like Vanessa. He was simply weak, and weakness could be forgiven. Cruelty could not. Because I wanted you to feel like you were standing on your own 2 feet. I wanted you to have dignity, pride in what you were building. Your father and I always believed in helping you kids without making you feel helpless. She drew a long breath. But dignity and pride, Daniel, they're earned. They can't be handed over, and they certainly can't be faked. She says you're being vindictive, he muttered. Vanessa says a lot of things, most of them about as valuable as her yoga certifications. Sarcasm edged her words, sharp but controlled. This isn't about sides, Daniel. It's about respect, about basic decency. Your wife thought it was acceptable to call your 64-year-old mother a loser in front of your colleagues. Tell me, is that respect? The line went quiet. Evelyn waited, sipping her coffee. At last, Daniel spoke again, his voice small, boyish. What do you want us to do? I want you to find your own place. Get qualified for your own mortgage. Build a life without using me as a safety net to abuse. Her tone gentle just enough to slip beneath his defenses. I love you, Daniel. I always will. But I will not be treated like a doormat in my own house, especially not by a woman who has never worked a full day in her life. And if we can't find a place in 30 days, his voice wavered between pleading and resignation, then you'll figure it out. You're 35 years old, Daniel. It's time you acted like it. The line fell silent again. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, gazing at the roses beyond the window. She thought of the man who had planted them, the man who had left her this insurance policy, this house, and the strength to stand tall when her own son faltered. She would not let that legacy be trampled. Not by Vanessa, not by anyone. Some storms announced themselves with thunder, others arrived silently, creeping in on a quiet afternoon with a bouquet of supermarket flowers and a counterfeit smile. Vanessa Caldwell appeared at Evelyn Hartman's door at 2 o'clock sharp, clad in sleek athleisure that likely cost more than a week of Daniel's salary. Her posture radiated entitlement, even as she clutched lilies like a peace offering. Without waiting for an invitation, she breezed past Evelyn into the foyer. Evelyn, we need to talk, she declared, her voice carrying that polished blend of remorse and determination. Evelyn closed the door behind her, her expression unreadable. By all means, Vanessa, make yourself comfortable in my house. Vanessa set the flowers on the entry table and turned, eyes softening with practiced contrition. I want to apologize for last night. I was out of line. Yes, you were. Evelyn's voice cut cleanly, neither angry nor forgiving, simply factual. Vanessa pressed on. I've been under a lot of stress lately. My studio isn't doing well. The holidays are coming. It all just... She let the excuse hang in the air like perfume gone sour. Your yoga studio, Evelyn interrupted, raising a brow. The one you've been launching for 2 years without a single paying client? For the first time, Vanessa's perfect composure cracked. Her lips tightened. It takes time to build a client base. I'm sure it does. Evelyn's tone dripped with polite curiosity. Tell me, Vanessa, how much money have you and Daniel sunk into this little business of yours? Ballpark figure. Vanessa shifted on her feet, her designer sneakers squeaking against the hardwood. Maybe 15,000. Equipment, marketing, insurance. 15,000 on a business that generates no income. Evelyn mused, turning toward the kitchen, forcing Vanessa to follow like a supplicant. While living rent-free in a $500,000 house. Interesting priorities. In the kitchen, Evelyn filled the kettle with water, her movements calm, deliberate. She didn't look at Vanessa when she asked, "Do you know what I did before I retired?" "You were some kind of bookkeeper, right?" "I was a certified financial investigator with the IRS for 32 years. Evelyn's voice was soft but edged with steel. "I specialized in uncovering fraudulent business expenses and unreported income." She set the kettle on the stove and finally turned to face her daughter-in-law. "So when you tell me your studio has no paying clients, I find that curious, especially since your social media paints a very different picture." The color drained from Vanessa's face. "Those are just friends helping me practice." "Friends who pay you in cash," Evelyn countered smoothly. "Cash you don't report. Cash that makes your under-the-table yoga business quite profitable." Vanessa's hands trembled. "You can't prove anything." Evelyn smiled, the kind of smile that had once made grown men crumble under IRS audits. "Can I? Your phone tracks your movements. So does your car. And your clients, your wealthy neighbors, are kind enough to post about their sessions. They tag you by name. They gush about their private instructor." "I don't need to prove anything, Vanessa. You've already done the work for me." Vanessa collapsed into a chair, the lilies she had brought now wilting on the entry table. Her mask was gone. "What do you want?" she whispered. "I want you to understand," Evelyn said, pouring hot water over tea bags, the domestic gesture at odds with the threat laced in her words. "I am not a helpless old woman. I am not your doormat, and I am certainly not your meal ticket. If you ever humiliate me again, the way you did last night, I won't just evict you. I'll report every dollar of your hidden income to the IRS, with documentation." Vanessa's eyes flashed with panic. "You wouldn't? Try me." The kettle hissed. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. Sometimes secrets don't just hide in the shadows. They ignite in the spotlight, exposing everything a person thought they could conceal. And when they do, the fallout can be catastrophic. If you're listening, don't forget to follow this story, because the cracks in Vanessa's perfect facade are only the beginning, and what comes next will leave you breathless. Like, share, and subscribe. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens when the storm truly breaks. That evening, Daniel showed up at his mother's door looking like a man unraveling. His shoulders slumped under the weight of exhaustion, his face drawn and pale, the boyish warmth in his eyes dimmed by a truth he could no longer ignore. "Vanessa told me about your little conversation today," he said as he sank into the chair his father once favored. His voice was low, threaded with disbelief. Evelyn Hartman regarded him with quiet patience, settling into her own chair across from him. "Did she also tell you about the business she's been running under the table?" "She said you're threatening to call the IRS over a few yoga lessons." Evelyn lifted her cup of tea, her calm composure making his words sound almost ridiculous. "A few lessons that bring in $75 an hour, Daniel. Do the math, 6 to 8 private sessions a week for the past year. That's nearly $24,000 in unreported income." Daniel's head snapped up, his brows furrowed. $75 an hour? "You didn't know?" Evelyn asked gently. His silence said enough. "She told me she was barely making anything," he whispered, the confession bitter on his tongue. "That the business was failing. That's why I've been working extra shifts." "The business she declared on her taxes is failing," Evelyn corrected softly. "The one she's hiding is flourishing." Daniel leaned back, his face pale as chalk. "I feel like an idiot." "You're not an idiot," Evelyn said firmly. "You're trusting. There's a difference." She reached across the small table, her hand resting over his. "But you need to see this for what it is, Daniel. It's not just about money. It's about dishonesty. It's about betrayal. Your wife has been lying to you about her income for more than a year." His chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. "What do I do?" "That's not for me to decide. You're a grown man." Evelyn withdrew her hand, signaling the end of comfort. Her eyes locked onto his, steady and unflinching. But whatever you choose, the clock hasn't changed. You have 26 days left in this house. Daniel pressed his palms into his eyes, dragging them down his face. And if Vanessa and if we try to work things out, then you work them out in your own home, with your own mortgage, using your own money, and hers, all of it, reported to the proper authorities. His lips parted as if to argue, but Evelyn leaned forward, her tone softer now, tinged with the fierce love only a mother can wield. Daniel, I love you. That will never change. But love does not mean I allow you to live blind while your wife deceives you. You need to understand who she really is. He looked at her then, really looked, his eyes bloodshot and raw. For a fleeting moment, Evelyn saw not the weary man before her, but the little boy who once crawled into her bed during thunderstorms, trembling until her arms wrapped around him. Now he trembled again, but for reasons she could not shield him from. You mean it about the 26 days? I mean every word, Evelyn said. She rose, leaned down, and pressed a kiss to his forehead, the way she had when life's storms were simpler. You'll figure it out. You always do. Daniel lingered in the chair, staring into the quiet living room where echoes of his father still lingered. He looked lost, unmoored, caught between loyalty and truth. But in the shadows of Evelyn's house, the reality had begun to sink its claws into him. His wife was not who he thought she was, and he could no longer pretend otherwise. Some betrayals arrive with whispers. Others march straight up your driveway in a black BMW, dressed in power suits and dripping with arrogance. Evelyn Hartman was pruning the last of her winter roses when the car pulled up. The passenger door opened first. Vanessa emerged, posture stiff, chin lifted high as though she were bringing salvation rather than shame. Then came the older woman in tailored perfection, her heels striking the pavement like a gavel. Evelyn, this is my mother, Margaret Caldwell, Vanessa announced as though introducing royalty. Margaret's eyes scanned the modest ranch house with cool disdain. Mrs. Hartman, she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My daughter explained your eviction threat. Frankly, I find it unreasonable. Evelyn set down her shears, slipped off her gloves, and rose slowly, deliberately. And what situation would that be, Mrs. Caldwell? This nonsense about forcing them out, Margaret replied crisply. Daniel and Vanessa have lived here 3 years. They have rights. Vanessa has invested herself in this home, maintaining it, improving it, making it a real household. Ah, so that was the angle. Sweat equity, contributions, a claim of ownership by service rather than by law. Evelyn smiled, her voice silk over steel. Interesting theory. Tell me, Margaret, what exactly has Vanessa contributed to this household? She's been managing expenses, coordinating maintenance, overseeing renovations. With whose money? Evelyn asked, tilting her head ever so slightly. Margaret faltered. Every bill, every improvement, every so-called renovation has been paid for with my funds. Evelyn continued, her tone pleasant as a Sunday brunch. Your daughter has not contributed a single dollar. She's been playing house with someone else's wallet. Margaret's jaw tightened. She had expected to intimidate a lonely widow. Instead, she found herself staring into the calm eyes of a woman who had spent 3 decades unraveling frauds far more sophisticated than her daughters. But Evelyn wasn't finished. Tell me, Mrs. Caldwell, when you handle Vanessa's taxes, do you include the cash payments from her private yoga sessions? Or do you simply overlook them? Vanessa blanched, panic sparking in her eyes. Mom, don't. What cash payments? Margaret's voice sharpened. Oh, I see she hasn't told you. Evelyn smiled sweetly, twisting the knife with surgical precision. Vanessa has been running quite a profitable, under-the-table business. Private yoga for wealthy neighbors, about $2,000 a month, all in cash, untaxed, unreported. I imagine the IRS would find that fascinating. The silence that followed was exquisite. Margaret turned to her daughter, disbelief flickering across her face. Vanessa's lips trembled, but no excuse came. Evelyn slipped her gloves back on, her dismissal clear. You both have a lovely afternoon. And Vanessa, 23 days. Don't forget. The BMW left in a cloud of humiliation, but Evelyn knew this war was far from over. Later that week, the first crack in Vanessa's carefully painted world split wide open. Evelyn was sipping coffee with her neighbor, Grace Wilson, when her phone buzzed. A text. Vanessa's name glowed on the screen, but the words weren't meant for her. Can't wait to see you tonight. Daniel's working late again, and the old bat will be asleep by 9. We'll have the whole house to ourselves. Wear that cologne I like, Jay. Grace leaned over, eyes widening as she read. Well, she murmured dryly. That's interesting. Evelyn took a screenshot, her expression cool, her pulse steady. She typed back, I think you meant to send this to someone else, Vanessa. Might want to be more careful with your phone. The reply came in seconds. Oh, God. Evelyn, I can explain. Her lips curved into a cold smile. Of course you can. Come home now. Vanessa arrived 20 minutes later, breathless, panicked, the mask finally stripped away. The storm had broken. Some truths destroy with a whisper. Others explode with a single, careless message. And if you're still here listening, don't look away now, because the next revelation will make everything you've heard so far seem like child's play. Hit like, share this story, and subscribe, because the real unraveling is just beginning. Vanessa stood in Evelyn Hartman's foyer, her breath shallow, her cheeks flushed from the frantic drive back. Her eyes darted toward the screenshot glowing on the coffee table. The message she had sent to another man lingered like smoke in the air. Evelyn rose from her chair, her frame small but unyielding, every inch of her radiating controlled fury. You're having an affair, she said, her voice quiet, steady, merciless. The only question is, does Daniel know? It's not what you think, Vanessa stammered, her voice breaking. It is exactly what I think, Evelyn shot back, stepping closer, her gaze sharp as glass. You've been cheating on my son, in this house, while he works double shifts to support you. How long, Vanessa? Vanessa's lips quivered, her eyes shining with shame. 8 months. 8 months. The number cracked the air like thunder. Evelyn inhaled, steadying herself, though her chest burned with rage. And who is he? You don't know him, Vanessa whispered. Try me. Her composure finally shattered. Nathan Collins. He owns a construction company. The name meant nothing to Evelyn yet, but she filed it away with the precision of a woman who had built her life on details. Does his wife know? Vanessa's silence was damning. So, Evelyn said coldly, you aren't just destroying Daniel's marriage. You're destroying someone else's too. She picked up her phone, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What's her name? Evelyn, please. What's her name? Sarah, Vanessa whispered, defeated. Sarah Collins. Evelyn stared at her with pure disgust. You think I won't tell her? You think I'll protect you while you betray my son under my roof? Please, if you tell her, it'll destroy 2 families. You already destroyed 2 families. I'm just leveling the scales. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice low and lethal. You have one chance, Vanessa, Either you tell Daniel about the affair tonight, or I will tell him myself tomorrow, along with your mother, your father, and Sarah Collins. Those are your choices. You're blackmailing me, Vanessa spat, her last defense. I'm giving you an opportunity, Evelyn corrected. She opened the door wide, her stance final. You have until morning, and pack your bags while you're at it. Affair or not, you're still out in 20 days. Vanessa stood frozen, her phone clenched in her hand like a lifeline. But Evelyn had already turned away, her back straight, her decision carved in stone. That night, the house was heavy with silence until Daniel's truck pulled into the driveway near midnight. Evelyn watched from her window as he sat motionless behind the wheel, his shoulders hunched, his head bowed as though bracing for impact. When he finally entered, his knock on her bedroom door was soft, hesitant. Mom, are you awake? She opened the door, and there he stood. Her son, his face crumpled, his eyes red-rimmed, looking years older than the boy she had raised. She told me, he said without preamble, collapsing into the chair beside her bed. She told me about Nathan. I'm sorry you had to hear it from her, Evelyn said quietly. Are you? His voice cracked with pain. Because Vanessa swears you've been looking for a way to break us apart since the beginning. Evelyn studied his face in the lamplight. Do you believe that? I don't know what to believe anymore. He rubbed his hands over his face, his words ragged. 8 months, Mom. She's been lying to me for 8 months. About the business, about the money, about everything. I know. How long have you suspected? Evelyn handed him her phone, the screenshot glowing on the screen. Daniel read the message twice, his jaw tightening with each word. His voice when it came was flat and hollow. She was bringing him here, to this house. While I was working overtime to pay bills, she was sneaking him into the home you bought for us. Yes. Daniel stared at the screen until his knuckles turned white. What kind of fool does that make me, Mom? That I never saw it? That I never noticed? It makes you trusting, Evelyn said gently. It makes you a good man who believed his wife would be good too. This is not your fault, Daniel. Not one bit of it. She says we can work it out. Counseling, a fresh start somewhere new. And what do you want? Evelyn asked softly. His answer was immediate, raw. I want the last 3 years back. I want to not feel like the biggest fool who ever lived. His voice cracked. I want to know how I married a stranger. Evelyn reached across, taking his hand as she had when storms rattled the windows of his childhood. People show us who they want us to see. Vanessa showed you who she thought you'd love. The question now is, can you love who she really is? His eyes lifted, pleading, could you have if it were Dad? The question landed with the force of truth. Evelyn did not flinch. No, I couldn't. But that's me, Daniel. This is your life. You must decide for yourself. He sat there in silence, broken, but something inside him had shifted. For the first time, he was beginning to see Vanessa not as his wife, but as the stranger she had always been. Some truths don't just sting, they shatter entire worlds. And when they come, they don't knock. They break down the door. It was Grace Wilson, Evelyn Hartman's longtime neighbor, who brought the revelation that turned betrayal into something far darker. She arrived one morning with a troubled look etched deep in her face. Evelyn poured her coffee, sensing the weight in her friend's silence. Finally, Grace spoke. Dorothy, my cousin works at the county clerk's office. She looked up some records for me. She hesitated, then delivered the blow. Vanessa isn't just cheating on Daniel. She's legally married to another man, Nathan Collins. They were married in Las Vegas 6 months ago. The words struck Evelyn like a physical blow. Married? Yes, married, Grace confirmed, sliding a folder across the table. Inside was a marriage certificate, official and damning. She's committed bigamy, a federal crime. Evelyn's breath left her in a rush. She'd known Vanessa was a liar, a manipulator, but this was criminal. And then Grace leaned closer, her voice dropping. There's more. Nathan has been transferring assets to her name. Money, investments, even partial ownership in his construction company. It's all documented. Piece by piece, the puzzle clicked into place. The separate bank accounts, the hidden cash business, the smug confidence. Vanessa hadn't stumbled into deception. She had orchestrated it. She wasn't simply betraying Daniel. She was building a fortune on the ruins of 2 men's lives. She's been planning this, Evelyn whispered. From the beginning. Grace nodded grimly. Nathan's ex-wife, Sarah Collins, divorced him 4 months ago. He left her for Vanessa, gave her significant assets during the settlement, then married Vanessa immediately after. Evelyn, your daughter-in-law is a professional. She didn't just destroy one family. She's destroyed several. The enormity of it settled like a weight on Evelyn's chest. Vanessa wasn't just cruel or selfish. She was a predator, cold, calculating, deliberate. Later that week, Detective Claire Donovan knocked on Evelyn's door. She carried herself with the quiet authority of someone used to navigating shattered lives. Mrs. Hartman, she said, settling into the living room chair, I understand you may have information regarding Vanessa Caldwell's activities. I'm leading the investigation into her and Nathan Collins. Evelyn listened in stunned silence as the detective laid out the case. Sarah Collins has been building evidence for months. When Nathan suddenly divorced her and transferred assets, she hired a private investigator. That's when we discovered Vanessa had married him while still legally married to your son. The bigamy charge is airtight, but we're also pursuing wire fraud, tax evasion, and mail fraud. Evelyn handed over everything she had documented. The evidence of Vanessa's under-the-table yoga business, the bank records, the screenshots, even the timeline of her behavior. Detective Donovan accepted the folder with a nod. Mrs. Hartman, she said, her voice steady, your family wasn't Vanessa's first target. We found records showing she researched several families before yours. Wealthy widows with unmarried children. She studied them, identified vulnerabilities, and then moved in. Your son wasn't her husband. He was her mark. Evelyn felt her stomach twist, anger boiling beneath her skin. For 3 years, she had opened her home, her heart, her resources. And all the while, Vanessa had been weaving a net around them like a spider stalking prey. The detective rose to leave. We're making arrests tomorrow. Both Vanessa and Nathan will be charged. I wanted you to hear it from me first. After she left, Evelyn sat alone in the quiet house. Her tea gone cold on the table beside her. Through the window, she watched the winter light stretch across her garden, pale and merciless. Her son's marriage had been nothing but a calculated fraud. His heartbreak was not an accident. It was engineered. And Evelyn, who had survived decades of unraveling the lies of strangers, now faced the most devastating truth of all, that the monster had been living under her roof. Sometimes the villains in our lives don't wear masks. They smile at our dinner tables. They kiss our children goodnight. And when their secrets come to light, the devastation leaves scars that never fade. If you've followed this far, don't turn away now. Because Vanessa's carefully built empire is about to collapse. And when it does, the fallout will be more explosive than anything you've heard yet. Like, share, subscribe, because the end game is coming, and you won't want to miss it. The arrest came 3 hours after dusk, in a wash of flashing blue and red lights that painted Evelyn Hartman's street in stark color. Police cruisers lined the driveway as officers moved with deliberate precision. Evelyn watched from her window, her breath steady, her spine straight, her eyes fixed on the woman who had turned her son's life into ash. Vanessa Caldwell emerged in handcuffs, her flawless hair disheveled, her designer tracksuit clinging like a costume stripped of meaning. For once, there was no audience to flatter, no stage to command, only the stunned silence of neighbors peeking from behind curtains, and the cold authority of law enforcement dismantling her carefully constructed world. Shock rippled across Vanessa's face, followed by rage, the fury of a predator caught in her own trap. Nathan Collins was let out moments later, his polished confidence gone, his wrists bound. Evelyn's jaw tightened as she watched them loaded into separate patrol cars, their empire collapsing in the very driveway where Vanessa had once strutted as though she owned the place. Daniel's truck pulled in just as the cars pulled away. He stepped out, pale and hollow-eyed, and stood frozen as he took in the scene. For a long moment, he said nothing, his gaze locked on the spot where his wife had stood in chains. Then he exhaled a shuddering breath and came inside. 9 days left, he said quietly, almost to himself. Take all the time you need, Evelyn answered, her voice steady but softened by the ache in her chest. The house will be here when you're ready. The following weeks unfolded with ruthless clarity. In court, the scale of Vanessa's crimes was laid bare. Federal prosecutor Olivia Myers stood before the judge and jury, her voice unwavering as she detailed the charges. Bigamy, financial fraud, tax evasion, identity theft, each word struck like a hammer against stone. The defendant operated a sophisticated marriage fraud scheme, Myers declared, her tone precise and merciless. For over 2 years, she targeted widowed women and their adult children across 3 states. The Hartman family was victim number 7. 7 families. Evelyn felt her breath catch as the number echoed in the chamber. Daniel sat beside her, his face a mask of quiet devastation. The prosecutor continued, her words unraveling Vanessa's empire thread by thread. The defendant infiltrated families systematically. She created financial dependency, exploited vulnerabilities, then moved on to wealthier targets while maintaining her original marriages for continued support. At one point, she was legally married to 4 different men simultaneously. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Evelyn remained still, though her hands curled into fists in her lap. Over $2 million, 7 families, years of deception, all of it orchestrated by the woman who had once stood in Evelyn's kitchen, smiling sweetly while calling her a loser. Vanessa sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her eyes flat, her expression eerily calm. Gone was the carefully curated glamour, the designer wardrobe, the air of superiority. She looked smaller now, diminished, a shell of the woman who had believed herself untouchable. When the judge pronounced the sentence, 8 years in federal prison, Vanessa did not flinch. Nathan Collins received 4 years for his role in the asset transfer fraud. Justice had been spoken, and yet Evelyn knew the scars would linger long after the prison doors closed. In the hallway after the verdict, Sarah Collins approached. Her posture carried the weariness of someone who had walked through fire and emerged carrying the embers. She extended a hand to Evelyn and Daniel. "I wanted to thank you both," Sarah said softly. "Your evidence helped convict them. But more than that, it reminded me that what happened to my family wasn't personal. To Vanessa, none of this ever was. It was business." Evelyn searched her eyes, recognizing the same hollow grief mirrored in Daniel's face. "And how are you now?" she asked. "Rebuilding," Sarah said simply, "just like your son." Her words lingered long after she left. 3 months later, Daniel packed the last of his belongings into boxes and moved into his own apartment across town. The house felt quieter without him, but it was a peaceful quiet, a silence no longer poisoned by deception. Evelyn stood in the doorway after he left, her hand resting on the frame, the winter sun warming her shoulders. The storm had passed, the monster had fallen. But the lessons carved into their lives would remain forever. The sentencing was over, but the echoes of it lingered long after the courtroom emptied. Evelyn Hartman sat beside her son Daniel, both of them silent witnesses to the unraveling of a life built on lies. Prosecutor Olivia Myers had stood tall, her voice clear, as she laid out the devastation. Vanessa Caldwell's crimes weren't accidents of greed. They were an empire of manipulation. 7 families gutted. Over $2 million siphoned through deceit. 4 simultaneous marriages, each one a rung in the ladder she climbed to wealth and ruin. Evelyn could still hear the prosecutor's final words. The Hartman family was fortunate. Mrs. Hartman's background in financial investigation allowed her to recognize the fraud before Vanessa could finish her scheme. Others weren't so lucky. Vanessa had stared ahead, eyes unblinking, her orange jumpsuit erasing the illusion of sophistication she once wielded like a weapon. Nathan Collins slumped nearby, stripped of his empire, his arrogance silenced by the gavel. When the judge handed down 8 years for Vanessa, Evelyn felt no triumph, only the deep, aching weight of inevitability. Justice was necessary, but it was not healing. Healing would come slowly, in fragments, in the quiet choices Daniel would make for himself. Afterward, in the hallway, Sarah Collins approached them once more. Her presence carried strength born from survival. "Sometimes," she said softly, "when people show us who they are, we should believe them the first time." Evelyn nodded, the words carved themselves into her bones. Months passed, winter softened into spring. The roses in Evelyn's garden bloomed again, their petals unfurling beneath the sun her husband once loved. Daniel had moved into his own apartment, a modest space across town. He came for dinner often, his eyes clearer now, the weight on his shoulders lighter with each passing week. The house was quieter without him, but it was a quiet Evelyn embraced. No more whispered insults in the dining room. No more counterfeit apologies carried in grocery store flowers. The silence was hers again, filled not with fear, but with peace. On one such evening, Evelyn sat alone in her sunroom, her tea steaming, the newspaper folded neatly beside her. She thought of all that had unfolded, the betrayal, the deception, the downfall, and she realized something with startling clarity. Kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all. It is weakness. And protecting the ones you love sometimes demands ruthlessness against those who would harm them. Vanessa had once called her a loser. Yet in the end, it was Vanessa who lost everything. Her freedom, her empire of lies, her illusion of control. Evelyn remained in her home, strong and unshaken, her dignity intact. She whispered into the stillness, as if speaking to the memory of her husband. "We protected him. He'll be all right." If you're still here listening to this story, remember, your voice matters. Share what you've learned, tell your story, and never be afraid to draw the line where love ends and self-respect begins. Like, share, and subscribe if this journey moved you, because lessons like these are too important to keep silent. Evelyn lifted her tea, the evening light gilding her face, and smiled faintly. She was exactly where she belonged, living her own life, answering to no one but herself.